Hey, folks, welcome back to another edition of the Seats to Streets podcast. If you've been around enough now, or you can read the little cool things we got here in the corner, I'm your host, J.R. Horn, and that guy over there is still Brian Gorman, he tells me. So something about the statutes limitations are not up yet until he can reveal his real name. We'll work on that later. But we're glad you're back with us for our current series here. But before we get in there, Brian, I just saw a picture on Facebook that you decided to smoke enough briskets to feed your entire church.
Mistakes were made. I
made, opening your
uh,
mouth to say that I can feed the entire church by smoking enough brisket for you all. My goodness.
Well, first of all, I can, and we did. So yeah, we did 5 briskets and 14 pork shoulders. Smoked it there on Saturday night going into Sunday morning. The mistake was that I agreed, and I don't normally do this. It's going to sound bad, and I shouldn't say it, but I agreed to play bass this week because we were without a bass player. So I was preaching, playing bass, and making that food, and that was mistakes were made. But yeah, we made enough brisket and enough pork shoulder to feed the whole church. It was funny. I was talking to some friends of mine the night before, and I'm like, yeah, I'm making this for the church picnic, and they went, we thought the church picnic meant like brats, hot dogs, hamburgers. I'm like, whose church you think this is?
Yeah,
like, we're doing this up right. So yeah, we did. It was funny after church, like another minister and his wife from town came in be able to eat, and 2 other families who don't attend the church but they're connected to people in the church came, and it was kind of fun because there were 2 families that came purely because they saw online we were doing that, and they had some of my cooking before at another event that I had done some catering for. They had some of it before, and when this came out, people from the church called them to go, hey, remember how you keep saying you wanted more of that? He's going to be doing this. So like they showed up for church for the first time because this is what we were doing. So it was it was awesome. So yeah, we did brisket and pork shoulder for the whole church.
So your 5 briskets, if you yielded 15 pounds off of them after you've trimmed them, loss of liquid,
yeah.
15 pounds, that's 75 pounds of brisket alone. And you had 14 pork shoulders?
Yeah. When we were done, we had 1 brisket left that we hadn't cut into. I overestimated a little bit. We had 1 brisket left that we hadn't cut into, and we had a couple of pork shoulders left that we hadn't cut into. But this is kind of fun. We're going to take those pork shoulders. We've got an event coming up in a few weeks that we call the Huddle, and it's for our key volunteers, key leaders. So we're going to take that that pork shoulder, because pork shoulder freezes really well after it's been smoked. And break it all back down fresh. For that, we left them intact. Break it all down fresh. And I think we're either going to do like pulled pork sliders, or maybe like a potato bar with pulled pork on top of it. So we're going to use that again for that next event. All good, all covered. So yeah, it was fun.
Wow.
Good, cool thing for us to do as a church.
So I finally got to use my ugly drum smoker for Labor Day weekend, and I cooked 15 pounds of pork shoulder for 3.5 families. I say 3.5 because one guy ended up coming himself. His wife wasn't able to make it, and I think I only had about like 3 pounds left over. I made carnitas, and then took the grill back, and then took my cast iron back out to the grill, fired the grill up real hot, stuck the cast iron on it, pulled some juice out of the pork shoulders that had been dripping down in, and then shred up all the carnitas and flash fried them like that. Oh baby. So good. Anyway, we don't have time to keep talking about this because we've got to continue on with our current series. Now, if you haven't, if it's your first time watching with us, I encourage you to go back. We're in the middle of our current series of the 5 questions a healthy church can answer. Now, that's a unique way of saying, a unique way of putting emphasis on the word can. 5 questions a healthy church can answer. Just because we think we can answer them doesn't really mean that we actually can. Can we answer these questions and determine our level of health as a disciple-making church? So today's question that we really want to start off with is one that most people actually put in the front, but we don't. Brian, tell us the question, and why do we not put it in the front? Why do we put it in the middle?
So the key question is ultimately, why do we do what we do? Right? If we talk about who we are and we talk about what we do, we have to be able to answer the question, why do we do what we do? And a lot of people put this in the front, in part because in their mind, they're like, well, you got to start with the why. You got to start with the why. And there's a lot of truth. Simon Sinek's teachings on that are outstanding. But our definition and his definition are a little bit different. The why that we're talking about is, what are the values that your church has that sort of determine what will and will not be done.
Right.
So years ago, I was talking with my son, my oldest son, when he was much younger, and he would ask me, like, why are you asking me to do this? Why are you asking me to do that? And one of the phrases I would use with him quite a bit is, because you're going to be a man of influence. I want you to know how to use that influence well. That I've talked to my children from the one of the prayers I give over every child that's ever been in our house from the moment they come in is that God help them grow up to be big, strong, healthy, smart, self-controlled men and women of influence, and that they use that influence for God. Everybody has influence, but I want them to be able to use it well. And so when I would talk to him about why I'm asking him to do this, why I'm asking him to do that, I would always bring it back to, because we value being people of influence. We value self-control. And your church has a set of values as well. Now, I will tell you this, trying to get clarity on your church's values may be the most complicated and time-consuming aspect of any of the things we're going to talk about. 100%. Because you have your aspirational values and you have your actual values. And those two things don't always play out together, right? If you ask most churches, why do you do what you do? And if you can get them back to that values, it's because we love Jesus. Okay, that's good. It's not really a value. Let's keep driving deeper at that. They'll go, well, because we want to see lost people come to know Jesus. Oh, okay, maybe that's true. Let's assume that's true. If we look at all of your stuff, does all of your stuff reflect back to lost people?
Right.
And if it doesn't reflect back to lost people, it may not actually be a value. When my family goes on vacation, it's not uncommon for us to stay somewhere where we can cook our own food at the resort or in the place where we're staying. And the reason we do that is because we value financial responsibility. And so we don't go on vacation to just have this absolute, spend every dollar we've got with no sense of stewardship. But there is a mindset for stewardship. And so because of that particular value, we're going to spend money that way. Another friend of mine, however, he values making memories. And so when they go on vacation, money does not exist. They will go full debt on any credit card if it's going to make a big memory. Now, we want to be able to make memories too, but our value of stewardship is usually going to overshadow our value of that. So when you talk to a church about their values, a lot of places will say, oh, we value things like we value restoration, or we value stewardship, or we value education or discipleship, whatever term they would have. But you really got to come back to, is that true? Or is it what you wish you did? And this brings us back to what we've talked about already. By continuing to ask that, well, but why? Those 5 whys we talked about before, you can really get down to, but why do we do that? Well, why do we do that? And there will come a point in there we'd be like, wait a minute, because there's a value, an undercurrent that you should be able to show through every program, every ministry, every aspect of your church. That's why it sits here. It can be really challenging to get there, because these are the things that you may never actually mention that much by name. You're going to talk about the who you are, right? For us, a place for everyone. You're going to talk about the what you do, meet people where they are, move them closer to Jesus. You're going to talk about these components. The values you may or may not talk about other than with your most committed leaders.
Right.
But if you and the leadership of the church don't know them, you can easily become distracted by chasing down other things.
Well, it's not even just so much distracted by chasing down other things. You won't be able to pinpoint the issues that you, or the roadblocks that you're running into, because you're functioning on aspirational values. I want us to be a church that does this, or feels, or values this. I want us to be a church that's driven by this. And preacher, listen, if you're bumping up into your staff and you have no clue why your staff just doesn't understand, if staff meeting starts at 9 o'clock and they show up 5 minutes late with a Starbucks cup in their hand and say, I got caught by a train. If you continue to run into those issues, you're functioning off aspirational values that we get here on time and we start and we do the most urgent and impactful things in our meetings. That's an aspirational value. Your staff is not running off that because you are allowing the current values of, we'll start when you get here because no one's holding me accountable. There's not a value of accountability, but you can't function off of aspirational values. You have to take the time to learn what are our actual values now. Are they healthy? And do they need to be turned into something different? Then you can take the steps to actually turn those aspirational values into your actual values.
Yeah. So here's how you get to some of these. It's using a combination of two different components. The first thing you want to do is something we've already been talking about before, and that is just kind of get an inventory of all the things that you're doing. We talked a while back about how to do that. Keep asking yourself the why, but what you're going to start looking for when you get all of your things together is, what's the thread that runs through all of them, right? You're trying to almost do the whole map behind you with strings going through everything. Like, what's the conspiracy theory behind it all? And if you're looking for the thread of what's consistent across here, you're going to begin to see some things. You're like, oh, wait a minute. This is true to us all the time. So that's one thing you look for. Look for the threads. Second thing you're going to look for is look for common phrases. There's a common phrase that you may, as a preacher, use. There may be a common phrase you hear people in your church saying a lot. And in that phrase, you're going to begin to gain some insight. So a common phrase in our church is, let's play around in reality, right? So there's some elements in that phrase, like, well, why do we use that phrase? What is that saying about us? Do we want to see that concept of playing around in reality? Meaning, how do we make this practical? Can we be honest about the weaknesses and the strengths of this? And does that permeate the programming of our church? Does that create a thread that runs through? So what you do with this is, with this group of people we've talked about a couple times before, with this group of key influencers around, you just start writing down words and phrases, and just write them all down. And then start asking, hey, what are some others that get to this? And then you play that same keep, kill, combine game we talk about a lot. And you'll start whittling it down and whittling it down and whittling it down. This will take sometimes months. In fact, when we recently, at our church, actually very recently in the last couple of years, went back and did this again, just to see, are we still living up to it? Because we knew that our church culture had changed, that our values change in the midst of this church culture, or is there a way we can add clarity to it? So for us, we started coming back to it. And we're like, we value, these are some things that we use as a church. Again, you're going to have your own. We started recognizing that we value restoration.
Right.
So much of what we do is about restoring people back into relationships with God, restoring people back into healthy relationships with each other, restoring the world itself, seeing God heal the world and put it back together, both in this life and in the age to come. When we talk about salvation, we oftentimes will go back to the fact that Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house. Meaning not just one day, but he's saving us right now here today and will one day save us. So restoration is something that permeates a huge component of what we do and who we are. So we started going, wait a minute, that's really that we hadn't maybe even recognized. But we got it from recognizing that what we often talk about is a fallen and broken world. That God steps into a fallen and broken world. Well, why do we teach that? Because we want them to know that he's also going to be the one who heals this broken world. But for our church, like, the value of healing, that didn't really sit. The value of salvation, that didn't really work. Esoteria, nope, definitely not going to go there. And so I was not in, I'll tell you this, I, as lead minister, what I did was I helped create this long list of words, but I was not involved in determining which ones we were going to come back to until they had really cut it down. They got it cut to 8, and then I started chiming in from there, because I wanted it to be the values of the people, not what I wanted to focus on. So we ended up with things like a value of restoration. We want to see lives restored, the world restored. We realized that because of that, what we value is, we value honesty. because you can't fix something if you can't be honest about the fact that it's broken.
Mm-hmm.
So we started talking about, the values of curiosity or the values of intellect, and these other ones. We went, yeah, those are all there, but at the end of the day, it's because we just want to be honest about what we see in Scripture. The honesty was the
Right.
word they came to, right? So we're talking about the value of honesty.
Right.
We talk about the value of compassion. We have to speak truth in love. So the value of compassion. So we started going through these, and one that was really intriguing that I didn't see. This is why I sent it to others and said, is the value of stories. Like, that one was a surprise to me, honestly, as they put it together. But as I put together good, smart, key people to look at these words and say, what are the threads? What's the why behind what we're doing, right? Is they started looking at it going, we're always sharing a story, whether it be the story of Jesus, whether it be the story out of history. I'm a big history guy. Whether it be a story out of my life. I don't tell jokes. Like, I'm not one of those guys who can go, so why'd the chicken cross the road? I don't know, because I don't know. I don't tell jokes. And so, I'm always telling a story. And we regularly have people on our stage telling their story. And they went, we're always sharing stories. Why? So that people will hear about God's restoration in their life.
Right.
And when they hear about that, they go, oh, wait a minute. This is a place where people are honest with us. This is a place where people can be curious. This is a place where people can ask good questions. This is a place where people can be challenged. It's a place where we deal with reality. It's right. We begin to put all these together, and they whittled it down for us. And I'm not going to give you ours because I want you to find yours. They whittled it down to 5 specific words for us. And that then now gives us something to sort of always be checking back to go, hey, this new program, this new thing we're talking about doing, how does that
does it live out the value? Yeah. Does it live out the value?
Picnic.
Does it strengthen it?
Right. We did this church picnic.
It has to fit somewhere.
So when we started looking at it, we went, okay, how does this church picnic help us be a place for everyone that meets people where they are, moves them closer to Jesus? How does this church picnic show the value of these different things that we have?
Right.
And once we were able to do that, now we were excited about the picnic because we knew what it was going to do. We knew what we were trying to achieve with it. We knew what elements we tried to have with it.
Right.
Versus, like, this is Brian just being a little churchy here for a second. Ministers especially. Let's play around in reality. Ministers, how many times does somebody come to you and go, oh, Pastor, I've got such a great idea. Brother so-and-so, can I talk to you about this this hot air balloon ministry I really think is important. I think if we can get all the women of the church to come together for this hot air balloon ministry, that it would be so impactful, because what we're going to do, Pastor, is we're going to put all of the women underneath the balloon in the basket together. So as they begin to talk, this sounds like I'm speaking ill about women.
Oh, here we go.
Let's talk about fishermen. We're going to get all the fishermen together so they can tell their stories about fishing and fill the balloon with hot air. And that's how we're going to fly it. And so they're gonna. This is what's gonna happen. If fishermen and golfers, that's all we need, and we can do. And okay,
you're trapped till 3:00 that afternoon, Sunday afternoon.
Why? Right? And their answer is, but man, won't the people of the church love this?
Maybe not, because
show me
maybe. Well, maybe the people of the church, not this individual. You have outliers. Maybe the people of the church have already bought into your actual healthy values, so that when this person comes up and says, hey, what about this? You preacher, you don't have to be the bad one that says, no, it's not going to fit. You've got this entire family behind you that is going to look and go, no, that's not going to fit. See, here's the thing that stands out to me when we're talking about looking for the thread and we're listening for common phrases, or looking for common phrases. Oftentimes, Brian, when I go into a church and I go into coach just the lead minister, each lead minister will understand looking for the thread and looking for common phrases, but they forget to look for the common phrases that come out of their mouth, their own mouth. They're looking for everyone else and getting feedback this way. No. That's part of it. But what are the common phrases that come out of your mouth? When you get frustrated because your church won't do something, because you're upset because they're not committed, right? What is the phrase that keeps coming out of your mouth? What is the thing that you're reacting to? Because that is showing you your values. It's also showing you that you are functioning off aspirational values and the church is functioning off actual values. So
Right.
what are the phrases and what are the times that you just get upset and be like, why don't my people get blank? Why are they not more committed? Why do they not grow on their own? Which, Brian, I mean, admittedly, that's what defines Seats the Streets, is that
Mhm.
we exist to help churches create committed, growing disciple makers. Because
Right.
oftentimes the committed part and the growing part are aspirational values to every church. But most churches just don't know how to take the next step of, how do I get my people to be committed?
You know,
How do I
but
get them to grow?
here's the reality of that is like this is why it's a conversation that takes a long time to come to fruition. Um,
Mhm.
Pastor, your people are committed. They just may not be committed to Jesus. So,
Mm.
what are they committed to
Mm.
and why? Because that's going to begin to tell you their values. Man, I can't get our people to show up on Sunday afternoon. Well, why not? Well, they're just not committed. No, 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 no. They're committed to something. What are they committed to? Well, they're committed to the Packers. All right, there's probably truth there. They're committed to football. That's probably true there. Can you get them to show up on Sunday afternoons when it's not football season? Well, no, I can't really get them to that either. Ooh, okay. So they're committed to something. What are they committed to? You know what? You might find out that your church is just super committed to being with friends and family. Ooh, you have a value all of a sudden.
Yes, you
There's a
do.
value that they're committed to that you can begin to capitalize on within your community and within your church. How do you help that value be lived out here too? And when you
Mhm.
get these right, you've heard us talk about this before. That's when you move from a "you're right, pastor, we should be more committed. You're right, brother, we should be more involved," to "ooh, that's right.
That's right.
That's what we want to be. That's who
Mhm.
we are." And so you move from "you're right" to "that's right." You're hitting on the values all of a sudden again. But asking yourself, if you want these things from your people, what is it they're already doing? Who are they
Mhm.
already? I have seen churches that value fun openly. Fun. They're going to make sure everything they do is a blast.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I've seen some churches that value their families.
Mhm.
So if it doesn't strengthen the family being together, they don't do the event because of that for their particular environments. I've seen churches that value that don't focus on men's ministries or women's ministries because they find it pulls families apart. They want everything they
Right.
do to be family. I've seen some that their whole church values multi-ethnicity,
Mhm.
multicultural, right? Ethnicity and cultural different. Multicultural. They value being multicultural. So they always think through, hey, where does our music fit into this? Where did the sense of
Right.
humor fit into this? Where did the event?
Mhm.
So that's why you've got to be able to find these things that you truly value. And when you value something, you're willing to sacrifice something else
Mhm.
for the thing that you value, right? Jesus, like you'd
Exactly.
be willing to sell everything to go buy that field.
Right.
And that's what you begin to find. If your church is willing to sell everything to push toward restoration, one of our
Right.
values, then we know we're in the right place. If we're willing to sacrifice good teaching for a good story, now let's be real about this. If I'm going to give you a good story, it's because I'm trying to teach you something great. But I may
Exactly.
slide it in under the story. But I also know that your story in our church, your story might take precedence over my sermon
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
you can tell a story about restoration and be honest about who you are. Don't go give me the happy version because honesty is one of our values. You can be honest about the brokenness of who you were and how God restored you into that with love and compassion. Cool. Your story may take precedent over my sermon if we talk about it.
100%.
It may take the place of, because I'll then show how Scripture shows that to be true.
Yep.
That's where you begin to get it. Move from "you're right" to "that's right," and man, you'll
Mhm.
find your people begin to light up on it. All the things that you want your people to value, they do value. They just may value it someplace else because they have another value underneath it.
Right. And that's, it's interesting, Brian, when we talk about "you're right, that's right," we talk about values, we talk about understanding our church and the 5 questions a healthy church can answer. I was sitting in I was sitting in a staff meeting at the church that we attend. I had jumped on part-time with the church that we attend. They had a youth ministry vacancy, and it was in shambles. There was zero values of the church being lived out in the ministry. And so in the past few months, I've been able to, put some legs underneath of it, communication, all this stuff, and get some things. And we're wrapping up the hiring process, and the lead minister looks at me and says, "Hey, um, would you consider us working out a deal where, as a part of this new hire's responsibilities, that they would sit under you and be coached for the first 6 months, because there's a few values, and they weren't speaking of this way, but this is what they're speaking about, of having the values that I've been able to set into place to continue on. And one of those values was partnering with parents. I've done nothing other than create a distribution list of emails and text message, cell phone numbers for text messages, and emailed and texted the parents regularly to know what is coming up in Bible studies. We average 30 students on Sunday morning, and we average 30 students on Sunday night. The average earlier this year in May, and this is going through summer, by the way, the average in May was less than 20. I've done nothing but to communicate to the students that are already there.
Yeah.
And that's the value that they recognize and say, no, we need to make sure this value continues to go on. And he actually made a really unique statement that plays into what we're going to talk about next time in our next podcast episode. Labor Day was coming up, and he looked, and he was sitting there talking, and the student and the lead ministers made the comment, well, the people that we're trying to reach most likely won't be here on Labor Day weekend. And I went, ooh, you're right. Because this is a church that is working through the process of who God is specifically sending us to. So we're going to talk about that next week. I don't want to take it away from it. But if you're sitting there and you're like, I kind of have no clue if the people that we're trying to reach would be here on a certain Sunday or not, I'd highly recommend watch the next episode. And if you haven't yet, go back and start the series. There's 5 episodes in this series of the 5 questions a healthy church can answer, because we want to make sure we're equipping you to create committed, growing disciple makers. That's the heart of Seats to Streets church coaching. We're not talking about growth. We're talking about health here. We want to make sure you are healthy, the church is healthy, your staff is healthy, so that you can create committed, growing disciple makers, so that we can see the entire world saturated with believers and disciple makers across the world. So we're glad you're with us, and we will see you on the next episode. Peace.
Later.